Hi, I'm Parker,
And I'm Tim.
and this is the Rage Podcast, where today we're going to share a scripture that might be looked over kind of a little bit, and that's what I guess we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, we're going to look over it when it really should be our mission
Yeah.
statement. I mean, this should be something we're defined by. So go ahead.
So the scripture comes from John 13, chapter 13, and we're going to start in verse 34. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, just as I loved you. You are also to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples if you have loved one another. It says if you love one another about 5 times within 2 sentences.
Yeah. And this is how we should be known. I mean, whenever the word Christianity or church or any of those things are spoken, that should be what people think of, because that's what Jesus asked us to do.
But
however,
yes,
that doesn't seem to be the case. And I think the church has a very, the secular world almost has a very negative reputation.
The church is a very negative place, and it's funny because I was watching a video late last night before I went to bed, and I think it might help us understand a little bit about why people think this way. It's because the world sees Christianity as it's supposed to be this perfect little happy-go-lucky life, and we don't have problems, and we follow these rules, and we don't break them. You know, they think that we are what's the word I'm looking for?
Perfect.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think we got it all together.
They think we think we're perfect, I guess, maybe.
Right.
But that's not the case. You know, it's just like the church is like a hospital. Sick people go to a hospital, same as sinners go to a church, you know? So I guess, but the world doesn't understand that whole concept, I guess.
Yeah. And I think that's an unfair standard. I mean, I think you said that very well. It's a very unfair standard, and what that unfair standard does is then it leads to disappointment, and disappointment leads to negativity. And that may be a little bit about what's going on, is that the world has placed, they hear a thing here, and they take a thing there, and they adjust this thing over here, and they get this idea of what a person that goes to church should be like, and when we don't measure up to that, which none of us are going to, they get a kind of a negative connotation of the church, and then all of a sudden, all we are is people who hate people and tell you never to have fun and all that kind of stuff.
And I'll tell you this, growing up being, and I'll use myself as the example kind of, just because, I mean, I have the job at the church now, and I kind of took on this role of being a leader in the faith a little bit. People do see us like that, 100%. I get it almost daily. I get something at me because of the way I think, or how people expect me to be perfect when Lord knows I'm not, and I know I'm not.
And I also think a lot of times the world's target of perfect, it's on this movable thing. So if I'm going this way, just whoop, it's over here, and and okay, you may have got that right, but you missed this, and there's a lot of sliding of the scale.
It changed, and it's funny how it's a person's perspective of what is perfect.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's where we get into a lot of bad situations, as well as the world doesn't understand what we're trying to accomplish here.
Right. Yeah, we're trying to enact transformation, which implies that we haven't reached it yet. And that's what we want to see happen. And I think when a lot of worldly people and the media and stuff get a hold of the church, and I mean church with a capital C, like not just Wayne Street, but all over, they want to start applying this incredible standard or their own standard. It may not have anything to do with this book here, but they want to have this idea and put it out there and then basically tar and feather us with it.
So how do we fix this situation? Is it a fixable problem?
Yeah.
I mean, I would say, and I'll give it as an example. So the world, obviously, there's the world, and then there's the church, and it's supposed to be 2 separate things, 2 different, pretty much ideologies almost. So when the church goes out into the sign right out in front of the front doors of the church, you're entering into the mission field. Yep. So when the church tries to go into the world, enters into the mission field, that is where the problem arises, because say obviously you could take this one in a million different ways, but the church is trying to transform this idea that the world has to, for reason and for truth, for what the great book says. But then people say that the world has, obviously become acceptance of it, and it's just become the irregular. So when the church says, no, this isn't that correct, the world's only way of taking that is, oh my gosh, look at how bigoted you are.
Well,
Look
yeah,
at, you know?
yeah. It's almost like I'm going to make a strange analogy here. It's almost like the Tyrannosaurus Rex in Jurassic Park. You can't see if you don't move, right? We've all know that famous scene where they're holding still and the dinosaur can't see them. I sometimes feel the world is the same way with the church. As long as we don't say anything or contradict or create any waves or hold any standards or try to tell somebody that maybe that's a sinful thing you don't want to do. As long as we don't do that, we can be very, very okay and we kind of go by without being noticed. But as soon as we try to help somebody by setting a standard or saying maybe you need to hold yourself to a higher standard, that gets the attention of the world, and then all of a sudden, bam, now we're all these phobics and all this stuff.
Christians are not allowed to judge.
Right.
Is the world's idea. Because we're, But
that's interpreted as saying, I can never say anything's wrong. And if you go back and look at Jesus, there's a lot of stuff that he said was wrong.
And I hear this often, what is the scripture, I can't think of the exact, but it's, judge with a righteous judgment, or what, something like that.
Oh, judge not, lest you be judged?
Yes.
That's the one, it's about the speck and the plank in your eye.
Yeah, okay.
It's that parable.
And I mean, I feel like, and it's hard to say, and what we're doing is using the stereotype Christian. Now, you can look at everyone has kind of a different view of what a Christian is and what makes them what not. Some people, the world thinks if you go to church, you're an automatic Christian. You think you're just, that person did.
And that works just like when you walk into your garage, you become a car. It's amazing.
And again, that's the problem. I don't want to always push it on, the world's ideas, but it's so hard for them to see what we're trying to do here because all they do is reject and reject and reject.
And they reject in that they only want to be affirmed.
Yeah.
If it's not affirming to whatever it is I want to do, even if it's do something crazy, drive my car too fast or whatever, as long as the world is being affirmed, the world seems to be okay with it. It's when we go and say, maybe we should be responsible, and maybe you should take responsibility for your actions, and maybe you should think through things before you do them, and maybe some of these consequences are negative, and you might not want to do that. As soon as you start that, then you're like judging when I say, I'm not really judging, I'm trying to help.
Yeah.
This is trying to be helpful.
And again, that's the thing. What we see as helpful, the world sees as an attack.
Yeah. And that's where the reputation comes from. And that I think that's a very negative thing because it just reduces us to the person that says, no, you can't do anything. And I think there's more to it than that. I think there's great power in accepting responsibility for something and being able to say, I've been blessed, therefore I'm going to do these good things with it, and I'm not going to waste it on this other stuff, which there's a lot of waste going on out there today.
And I think it's important to know that this problem will continue on forever.
It's not going anywhere. No.
Making the Rage podcast is not going to change the balance here. What I think would be the most beneficial lesson from today's podcast is actually looking at how the church can target towards the world in a better manner.
Yes.
Because obviously, we don't want to come off as, this is what he said, this is what God says, this is what God says, this is what God says. Maybe that's not exactly the most appropriate way to handle these situations. And you look at every time Jesus encountered anyone who was different. Who was not following maybe the right laws or was not the right spot in life, he never went like, well, God told you this, Yeah. Eventually he got there, but the first greeting was never that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he always engaged people where they were. And, you could pick your story, saving the woman who was caught in adultery, or the woman at the well, or all the blind and sick people that he dealt with. He never talked down to them. Now, the Pharisees he talked down to. Because they were the ones judging. Yeah, they earned it. But the people in the crowd that everybody else wanted to talk down to, Jesus, he had no interest in that. So I think that sometimes we would do ourselves, as Christians, we would do ourselves a great service if we would focus on that. Say, yes, there are standards and things out there, but sometimes the way we approach the world could probably be a little better.
And truly understand and take heart to what that sign out there says. You are now entering into the mission field.
And you need to enter it respectfully.
Yes.
That's true.
It is important to understand that once you are out there, you are viewed as the black sheep, pretty much.
Right.
You're not.
And while there's no questioning the fact that we sometimes get branded with a mark that we don't deserve, sometimes though we've earned that bad blood. There's some out there who have done some things and said some things, and been a part of some stuff and didn't want to show grace or mercy of any kind, and that got us in trouble.
There was, and you did a one of the Wednesday nights during quarantine. Mm-hmm. You did a pastor who was on YouTube, Steven Anderson.
No, Peter Popoff.
Was it him?
He was one of the ones
I think you also did Steven Anderson, who is a guy on YouTube who is known as the American Hate Preacher.
That sounds like something I'd ripped on.
And you did, and he's the one who's screaming behind a pulpit at the world, and that's not how we should be targeting the world, is by screaming at them at all. Yeah. Because that's fighting fire with fire.
How many people has that guy converted? This many.
Yeah. And I guess if we can use another example, let's look at the Westboro Baptist Church.
Yeah, I hate those guys.
You want to know where the stigma comes from?
Yeah, they're not helping us.
I don't want to put all the blame on them, but here in America, they
earned a lot of it.
They have really progressed this whole stigma.
And that's the part of it that's really dangerous, is that's what the world thinks of when they think of us. I'm not that. Fred Phelps does not represent me, period, and anything. And I think that reputation is so negative and so bad. I mean, even Parker.
But it's become so powerful.
It has, and even people like Parker and I, who are very sold into Christianity, look at that guy like he don't represent us, And I think if more of the times the good that the church does, which believe me, far outweighs the bad, we get focused on a little bit more, and we got some of the loudest amongst us to shut up for a little bit, that would really help us.
So what I think is important now as well is when the world sees the Christian mascot as the Westboro Baptist Church and those organizations out there.
Which if that's you, for goodness sake, get in the comments or something, get in touch with us so we can talk you out of that. That does not represent the church, period. At all. They represent hate-mongering, and I don't want any part of that in any way whatsoever.
And Scripture, as we just read as the opening of this,
right.
pretty much says that is not how we are to be handling ourselves.
I mean, look, even if they're right, which I'm not even willing to concede that, even if they're right, their approach is entirely wrong. So
the approach is very, very wrong.
It's about as wrong as you can be.
You want to talk about morals? If we're supposed to be people that have morals in the world, they threw theirs out the window.
Yeah. So please, for goodness sake, if you don't get anything else out of this podcast, please understand that the Westboro Baptist Church.
And if you are going to look up what the Westboro Baptist Church is,
we don't recommend that.
Do not. And don't probably gotta be older than 18.
Right. And probably a note from your mom before you go on there. But it just. But the problem is that's the image that's out there, and it's so wrong. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to start doing these. And I talked to Parker when he first came on staff here about doing these, because we need to get another message out there than that. And because I'm quite frankly ashamed of that one, to be honest with you. So, well, I think that we have come to the moment that we're going to give Parker a chance to say a little bit about the other side of this argument. So in order to do that, we're going to move into that sacred space known as Next Level with Parker.
So we've talked a lot about, in this episode, how we've kind of put the world at blame. Yet I don't want that to be the overall message, because I will say we are at fault in some way as well. And we mentioned just prior to this the Westboro Baptist Church. That's not how we are to be seen. The scripture we opened up with is we are to love one another as God has so loved us. And it is our job to making sure we are still following that and not being represented in those ways of not loving. Don't be caught not loving, the people of the world, because they need the love just as much as we want the world to love us. It goes both ways, and I think that is a very important message for today's podcast.
Well, thanks for that, Parker, and we hope that all of you will go out and do the best you can do to represent your faith well, because the world deserves a good witness.
Yeah. So remember, you are entering into the mission field.
Go respectfully.